As Pride Month comes to an end, I'd like to discuss one of the most popular topics about LGBT history: who started Pride? Most people say Marsha P. Johnson, a trans woman, and then proceed to use that as justification for centering trans women in every conversation about LGBT history. But most people are wrong. The gay rights movement didn't start with Stonewall, and it certainly didn't stop at Obergefell. So today, let's discuss the real history of the gay rights movement and recognize those who are often overlooked. In 1915, Emma Goldman's anarchist platform includes homosexual rights. She was the first and only woman, indeed the first and only American, according to Magnus Hirschfeld, to take up the defense of homosexual love before the general public. Her first speech on the subject, The Intermediate Sex, a discussion of homosexuality, inspired many gay people of their time to get involved with labor rights participation, like the civil rights movement that later helped them organize for themselves. 1924. German immigrant Henry Gerber founds the first gay rights organization, Society for Human Rights, in Chicago, and publishes the first known gay newsletter, Friendship and Freedom, for a year. He served as secretary for the president of the society, being a black preacher named John T. Graves. Gerber, known as the grandfather of the American gay movement, later wrote for the Mattachine Society and contributed to a 1930s Freethinker publication. In 1930s, Prescott Townsend advocated the repeal of anti-sodomy laws before the Massachusetts legislature, believed to have been the first individual to organize a public conversation about homosexuality in the United States. In 1949, interracial couple Merton Bird and W. Dorr Legg found the Los Angeles homophile social club Knights of the Clock, which also addresses social problems that affected interracial couples, including employment counseling and locating integrated housing for same-sex couples. In 1951, under the pen name Daniel Webster Corey, Edward Saragan writes The Homosexual in America, a subjective approach in the wake of Kinsey Report revelations. His book is the first sympathetic publication in the United States to discuss homosexual political rights and inspires many gay men to seek out the new homophile movement to advance their political standing. 1951, the Mattachine Society, the first national gay rights organization, is formed by Communist Party member Harry Hay, considered by many to be the founder of the gay rights movement, along with Rudy Gernrich, Chuck Rowland, Bob Hull, and Dale Jennings, meeting in the church basement of Unitarian minister Wallace D. Ortega Maxey. The primary goals of the society were to unify homosexuals isolated from their own kind, educate homosexuals and heterosexuals towards an ethical homosexual culture paralleling the cultures of the Negro, Mexican, and Jewish peoples, lead the more socially conscious homosexual, provide leadership to the whole mass of social variants, and assist gays that are victimized daily as a result of oppression. Also in 1951, philanthropist Robert Allerton starts encouraging adult adoption legislation in the Illinois state legislature. In 1960, he uses this legal loophole to legally protect the inheritance rights of his partner of 40 years, inspiring other gay men to do the same, including civil rights pioneer Bayard Rustin and Jem Nagel. In 1955, the first American political organization in the United States, the Daughters of Bilitis, was established by Filipino-American Rose Bamberger, Rosemary Stillipin, Del Martin, Phyllis Lyon, Noni Frey, who later founded the working-class lesbian club Quatrefoil, and her Chicana girlfriend Mary, and Marcia Foster and her girlfriend June. DOB's activities included hosting public forums on homosexuality, offering support to isolated married and mothering lesbians, and participating in research activities. In 1956, editors of One, the homosexual magazine, the Mattachine's periodical named by their black gay proofreader Bailey Whitaker, fight their obscenity charges all the way to the Supreme Court. One, including V. Olson, becomes their first ruling to extend the First Amendment to gay-related speech. For the first time, gay newspapers, magazines, and other publications could be lawfully distributed through the public mail service without running the risk of confiscation, fines, and arrest. The same year, One established the One Institute of Homophile Studies, which, in addition to organizing classes and annual conferences, also published the One Institute Quarterly, a journal dedicated to the academic exploration of homosexuality. In 1958, Cuban-born Tony Segura is the first openly homosexual speaker on a news panel in television history. He's nicknamed the architect of the homophile movement for his role in developing the New York Area Council of the Mattachine Society, organizing the Eastern Regional chapters and reaching out to the South and as far west as Colorado to offer direction in their activist outreach. In 1959, the Mattachine Society holds their yearly convention in Denver, marking a major turning point in the national reach and visibility of Mattachine organizing. Elver Barker holds a press conference hoping bravery and media transparency will attract new members and positive attention, and the local leaders consent to have their names and photographs taken for the Denver Post and Rocky Mountain News. In 1959, Cooper's Donuts riot predates Stonewall by a decade. Mexican gay author John Ritchie described the targets as two hustlers, two queens, and a young man just cruising, who threw donuts, coffee, and paper plates at arresting officers until police reinforcements returned to shut down Main Street, where protesters allegedly danced on cars and set fires. In the 1960s, homophile organizations host gay-ins around Griffith Park, Los Angeles. In addition to promoting visibility, they also hosted tours of gay bars and political forums with candidates for local office. Chinese-American lesbian activist Crystal Jang and friends reformed the dress code at the City College of San Francisco so women can wear masculine attire. In 19 Jose Julia Sarria and Guy Straight formed the League for Civil Education, which ran programs on the topic of homosexuality and provided support for men being ostracized for being gay and those caught in police raids, who he encouraged to plead not guilty and demand a jury trial, which clogged the courts. In 1961, Jose Sarria becomes the first openly gay candidate for public office, running for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Also in 1961, astronomer Frank Kanemy files the first gay rights appeal to the Supreme Court, contesting his firing from Army Map Services for homosexuality as an affront to human dignity. In 1962, Illinois becomes the first state in the U.S. to decriminalize homosexual acts between consenting adults and privates. Also in 1962, Tavern Guild, the first gay business association, forms to raise money for legal fees and bail for people arrested at gay bars, helping bar owners coordinate their response to the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control and Police. In 1963, father of Florida gay rights Richard Inman started Athenaeum, the first state-chartered explicitly homosexual organization in the South. He challenged the sexual profiling of gay men. In 1964, activists led by Randy Wicker, seeking more visibility after the positive reception of his radio panel on homosexuals' right to be heard 2 years earlier, participate in the first gay rights public demonstration. They picket the Whitehall Street Induction Center over confidentiality violations of gay men's draft records, which followed them as permanently unemployable. Among them is Annie on My Mind author Nancy Garden. Also in 1964, Black pastor Cecil Williams and Reverend Ted McLavena, along with Del Martin on the Board of Trustees, formed the Council on Religion and the Homosexual to educate religious communities about gay and lesbian issues, as well as enlist religious leaders to advocate for homosexual concerns. They're believed to have the first use of homosexual in their name. They get Episcopal Bishop James Pike to appoint a church committee on homosexuality that would support the repeal of sodomy laws and an end to the harassment of homosexuals by police and other local authorities. A brief riot ensues after several members are arrested by the San Francisco PD during a costume party fundraiser for meeting space. Additionally, in 1964, protests are held at both the White House and United Nations building to raise awareness of Cuba's incarceration of gay men in forced labor camps. The Society for Individual Rights was also founded with the street-level organizing goals of public affirmation of gay and lesbian identity, elimination of victimless crime laws, providing a range of social services including legal aid to gays in difficulties, and promoting a sense of a gay and lesbian community. SIR sponsored both social and political functions, including bowling leagues, bridge clubs, voter registration drives, and candidates' nights. In association with the Tavern Guild, SIR printed and distributed pocket lawyers. These pocket-sized guides offered advice on what to do if arrested or harassed by police. In 1965, 150 people organized by 3 teenagers working with the Janus Society participate in a sit-in after the manager of Dewey's Lunch Counter in Philadelphia refused service to several people he thought looked gay. Over the next 5 days, the Janus Society distributed leaflets outside the hamburger chain and staged a smaller sit-in, finally prompting management to change policy. Additionally, in 1965, gay Mormon Reverend Adrian Rauravor organizes Vanguard for Homeless and Marginalized LGBT Youth in San Francisco's Tenderloin District, hosting dinners, dances, and public protests for equal treatment, acceptance, and to end discrimination. The street teens are so inspired, they're the ones who picket Gene Compton's cafeteria after a mild riot the night before, when a drag queen tossed her coffee cup at a cop who requested his ID. In 1965, Mattachine Midwest fought police entrapment and bar raids in Chicago. They set up a gay and lesbian legal, medical, counseling, employment, or religious referral hotline that lasts 18 years. When CRH member and straight ally Reverend Canon Robert Cromie was demoted by the Grace Cathedral Episcopal Church, 30 activists protested outside their iconic Ghiberti doors in the first documented gay protest against a religious institution. Additionally, in 1965, DOB newsletter editor Barbara Giddings, later dubbed the mother of the gay rights movement, and former government employees who lost their jobs under the Lavender Scare staged public demonstrations in front of the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, and Independence Hall in Philadelphia for LGBT civil rights. The picketing of Independence Hall in Philadelphia became a 4th of July tradition known as annual reminders, which started with 40 gays and lesbians increased up to 120 in 1969. The next year, the East Coast Homophile organization changed their demonstration to Christopher Street Liberation Day to commemorate Stonewall. At the recommendation of first gay bookstore owner Craig Rodwell, they moved to New York City where he headed the committee for the first official gay pride. In 1966, Lily Vinces becomes the editor of the Medicine Society of Washington's quarterly magazine, The Homosexual Citizen, the movement's first truly militant civil rights publication. Additionally, in 1966, the North American Conference of Homophile Organizations is founded to politically coordinate gay and lesbian groups around the country. In 1968, they resolved to send questionnaires to political candidates to determine positions on their new 5-point homosexual Bill of Rights. The Medicine Society also protests the New York Liquor Authority's prohibition against serving disorderly gay patrons with a sip-in at Greenwich Village's Julius Bar before formally suing. Dick Leach brings his case to the New York State Appellate Court. Eventually, the New York City Commission allows homosexuals the right to be served, which also grants liquor licenses to explicitly gay bars. Multiple city protests were held against the military exclusion of homosexuals on Armed Forces Day, including a 15-car, 20-mile motorcade from Don Slater's committee to fight exclusion of homosexuals from the armed forces, regarded as the first gay parade. Slater was interviewed by CBS News, Time Magazine, and the New York Times, reaching thousands. In 1966, the first Gay and Lesbian Community Center opens, and the Medicine Society pickets the Chicago Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times for their refusal of press information and advertising from a homophile organization. In 1967, New York City's Civil Service Commission makes public its year-old policy of allowing city agencies to hire and employ lesbians and gay men after successful lobbying by the Medicine Society's New York chapter. Columbia University also becomes the first American college to officially recognize a gay student group, Robert Dunny the Punk Martin Student Homophile League. In 1968, they disrupted a psychiatry panel discussing homosexuality. Additionally, the Black Cat riots start after undercover police arrest 16 kissing bar patrons celebrating the new year. The altercation resulted in at least one arrest for assaulting a police officer and a gay man with a ruptured spleen. A month later, over 500 people organized by Personal Rights in Defense and Education marched outside the Black Cat Tavern in protest, supported by the mayor and other city officers, ending with a kiss-in. This is the first known association of Pride with LGBT rights. Their Pride newsletter became The Advocate. The bar's owner, Saul Stoneman, won his case against police raids as illegal under California state law, but cost him $38,000 in the process, and the bar stayed closed. The two patrons convicted for lewd conduct make the argument for equal protection for homosexuals under the 14th Amendment, another first. A lesbian bar police raid spurs the Cuban immigrant Ada Bello and the Jewish social worker Carol Friedman to form the Homophile Action League. They request a meeting with the Philadelphia police inspector, forcing the hand of their public relations officer to tell the Philadelphia Inquirer, homosexuals have been, are now, and will be treated equally with heterosexuals. Daughters of Bilitis founders and their latter editors, Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, become the first openly lesbian couple to join the National Organization for Women, Martin becoming their first out lesbian elected to the board of directors. The first bookstore dedicated solely to gay and lesbian titles and authors opens in New York City. Owner, Medicine member, and dyslexic Craig Rodwell refuses to stock pornography and models his shop after Christian Science reading rooms. In less than 6 months, the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookstore has its own periodical available for distribution. In 1968, 2 gay bar raids before the Democratic National Convention mobilized a coalition between Chicago homosexuals and civil rights activists, who hold a press conference denouncing police harassment and circulating a petition among anti-war protesters. Additionally, in 1968, the Metropolitan Community Church is founded as the first explicitly gay-inclusive Protestant ministry. The Reverend officiates the first known public same-sex union of 2 Latino gay men. In 1969, boycotts are organized by the Committee for Homosexual Freedom against Tower Records, Safeway, Macy's, and a federal building after homosexual employees are explicitly fired for their sexuality. CHF formed in San Francisco in response to the state steamship company firing Gil Whittington after his public coming out. Additionally, in 1969, the Stonewall riots transformed the gay rights movement from one limited to a small number of activists into a widespread protest for equal rights and acceptance. Multiracial butch lesbian Storm DeLavery punched her arresting a cop and shouted to the crowd, "Are none of you going to do anything?" One of the many gay Latino patrons, Raymond Castro, shoved the two officers, dragging him by the arms to the ground. 3 days of riots ensued. To build on the momentum, militant activist groups like the Gay Liberation Front formed in the following weeks, and Dick Leach sprung from the Medellin Action Committee. The Medellin Society and Daughters of Bilitis sponsored a rally at Washington Square Park a month after the uprising. Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon picked Robin Teller up from the airport when she moved to San Francisco after reading the latter. 20 years later, she organized the first march on Washington for lesbian and gay rights. Harry Hay was behind the Radical Fairies too, and Randy Wicker surfaced again in the Gay Activist Alliance, co-founded by Barbara Gilling's partner, photojournalist Kay Tobin Lawton. Frank Kameny not only sent copies of his gay rights manifesto to Kennedy, Johnson, the cabinet, and the Supreme Court, and the U.S. Congress, but he also mailed his newsletter to J. Edgar Hoover until Hoover died. Barbara Giddings used to bring a stuffed dinosaur toy with her to meetings after having her presence as an older woman questioned. After Stonewall, Giddings and Kameny successfully campaigned the American Psychiatric Association to declassify homosexuality as a mental illness. They never stopped dedicating themselves to gay liberation. There is more. Of course there's more, but given how much we center Stonewall in every conversation, I think it's important to remember what led up to that event and what laid the foundations for the rights we have today. As you might notice, most items in this timeline regard lesbians and gay men with very little mention of the T, which was eventually added because it stood for transsexuals/transvestites, who were understood to be gay men in drag, and differs greatly from the concept of transgenderism that is common today. To lie and posit that gay rights began with Marsha P. Johnson, a self-admitted gay man and drag queen, is incorrect, homophobic, and revisionist, in an effort to censor the myriad of people who do not belong in the community. Just like feminism, the LGBT community has been all lives mattered, to the extent that establishing boundaries is seen as a form of hatred. The LGBT community was founded for the liberation of homosexuals, that is, strictly for same-sex attracted people. Pretending otherwise and worrying about niceness and inclusiveness to those who are not same-sex attracted has led to an unfocused movement that ignores the demographics it was Pretending otherwise and worrying about niceties and inclusiveness to those who are not same-sex attracted has led to an unfocused movement that ignores the demographics it was formed to help. This, dear viewers, is where we part. This was actually really interesting. I'm so glad that people on Tumblr make these awesomely researched posts that I can start bouncing off of, because it was just so interesting to see all these little things that I knew a little bit about. Like, I knew about the Daughters of Bilitis, and I knew about some of the older lesbian magazines and whatnot, but I didn't realize just how many of these names kept reappearing, or just how many small victories there were before we finally got somewhere big and explosive. And it's honestly just very nice to be able to see that there was a community once, and I think there will be one again, even if it might take a long time to rebuild what we have right now. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them in the comments down below, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.